My name is Clara Henderson, and I'm 33 years old. For the past 6 years, I've paid my parents' mortgage, covered their medical bills, and repaired nearly every inch of their aging house, all while my older brother, Evan, couldn't be bothered to call. He's 3 years older than me, the golden child of our family. I used to tell myself it didn't bother me, that being the dependable one was enough. That illusion shattered last weekend. While looking for my mother's insurance forms in a cluttered drawer, I found an envelope labeled Last Will and Testament, updated February 14th. Curiosity made me open it. Within 2 minutes, my entire world tilted on its axis. Everything, the house, the savings, the investments, the furniture, went to Evan and me? I was left with a note and a single item. To our daughter Clara, we leave the antique porcelain set belonging to Margaret's mother, a half-broken china collection that had been in the attic since I was a teenager. That was it. No mention of the $2,000 I send them every month. No acknowledgement of the years of sacrifice, of the nights I skipped dinners to make sure their mortgage was paid. Nothing. When I confronted them later that day, Mom looked at me like I was the problem, like I had invaded her privacy. Dad, sitting in his recliner with the baseball game humming in the background, didn't even stand. "You shouldn't have been snooping through our personal papers," he said flatly. "I was looking for the insurance policy you asked me to find," I replied. My voice shook, but not from guilt, from disbelief. "Why does Evan get everything?" They exchanged a glance. I'd seen that look my entire life. Silent teamwork, unified reasoning. Mom finally sighed, folding her hands in her lap. "Sweetheart, we love you both, you know that. But Evan needs more help. You're the stable one. You've always been so capable." Capable. That word stung more than I expected. Dad nodded, as if he were confirming a business deal. "It just makes sense. He's had trouble finding steady work. He needs a safety net." "So my reward for being responsible is nothing," I said. "And Evan's reward for wasting every opportunity is everything?" Mom's voice softened like she was speaking to a child. "It's not about rewards, honey. It's about fairness. Evan will take care of us when we're older." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Evan, the man who can't even remember your anniversary, that's who you're trusting with your future?" Dad's tone sharpened. "Watch your tone, Clara. He's trying to turn his life around." "Really? Between which failed business and which unpaid credit card?" Their silence told me everything. So I asked the question that had been burning a hole in my chest. "What about the $48,000 I've given you these last 6 years? Does that mean nothing?" Mom blinked, surprised. "You've been keeping track?" "Of course I've been keeping track," I said, my voice breaking. "That money could have gone to my own house, my own future, but I gave it to you because I thought we were family." Dad's expression hardened. "We appreciate your help, but it doesn't entitle you to our estate. It's our money, Clara. We'll do with it what we see fit." That sentence snapped something inside me. All those years of scrimping, skipping vacations, driving my decade-old sedan because I thought family mattered more than comfort. And suddenly I realized, in their eyes, I was nothing but an ATM with feelings. Mom reached out for my hand. "It's just stuff, dear. Family is what matters." I stepped back. If it's just stuff, then why not split it equally? She didn't answer. Neither of them did. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I couldn't breathe. "I should go," I said, and before they could stop me, I walked out. "Clara, please try to understand." Mom called after me. I didn't turn around. By the time I reached my car, tears were already streaming down my face. I wasn't crying over money, not really. I was crying over the realization that I'd spent my adulthood trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. I sat there for 15 minutes sobbing behind the wheel until my vision cleared enough to drive. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I parked at a quiet pond a few miles from my apartment. That spot had always helped me think. I called my best friend, Leah. "They what?" she shouted when I told her. "Clara, that's insane. After everything you've done for them?" "I know," I whispered. I don't get how they can justify it." "Because they're used to you being the dependable one," Leah said. "They know you'll always help, so they take advantage. Meanwhile, Evan gets rewarded for being useless." Her anger mirrored mine. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. part of me wants to cut them off completely. But another part feels guilty, like I'm abandoning them. Clara, they abandoned you first, emotionally anyway. Leah's tone softened. Maybe it's time to stop setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that line in the will. Everything to Evan Henderson, around 2 a.m. I got up, turned on my desk lamp, and began going through my finances. Over the past 6 years, I'd sent my parents just over $48,000 in cash transfers. But once I included groceries, medicine, repairs, and unpaid favors, the real total was closer to $56,000, $56,000. I stared at the number until the digits blurred. That was a down payment on a house, a full year's salary for some people, and I'd handed it away without hesitation. That was the moment clarity hit me like a wave. I had been financing my own neglect. By morning, I had a plan. I wasn't going to beg for inclusion in their will or demand fairness. I was done playing the grateful daughter who gave without question, so I drafted an email, calm, precise, no anger, just truth. Subject, moving forward. Dear Mom and Dad, after learning about the will yesterday, I've realized I need to reassess my priorities. Over the past 6 years, I've contributed more than $56,000 to your expenses. I did it out of love, not obligation. But discovering that everything is being left to Evan makes it clear that my sacrifices haven't been valued. I'll always care about you, but starting next month, I'll no longer be able to provide financial support. I hope you understand. Love, Clara. I hovered over send for a long time. My stomach churned, but my hands didn't shake this time. Then I clicked. The message whooshed away, and with it, years of resentment I hadn't even known I'd been carrying. I left my apartment, turned my phone off, and walked around the park near my office. By the time I returned 3 hours later, my phone had exploded with notifications. 6 missed calls from Mom, 4 from Dad, and a dozen texts. How could you do this to us? We never asked for that money. Is this blackmail to make us change the will? I didn't respond to any of them. For the first time in my life, I let the silence speak for me. The next morning, there was a knock on my door that made my heart race. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. When I opened the door, my parents stood there, Mom's face red from crying, Dad's lips pressed in that tight, judgmental line I'd known all my life. We need to talk about your email, Dad said flatly. I stepped aside, motioning for them to come in. The small apartment suddenly felt even smaller, the air thick with unspoken tension. Mom sat on the couch, clutching a tissue, while Dad remained standing, arms crossed like a disappointed principal. I meant what I wrote, I began, keeping my voice steady. I'm done supporting you financially. Mom's voice trembled. Because of the will? Clara, please tell me this isn't about money. I stared at her in disbelief. It's not about money, Mom. It's about respect. It's about 6 years of sacrifices you pretended not to see. Dad sighed heavily. We appreciate everything you've done, but that doesn't mean you get to dictate what happens with our estate. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. I never wanted your estate, Dad. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted fairness. But what I got was a reminder that in this family, effort means nothing unless you're Evan. He frowned, clearly offended. That's not true. Evan just needs more help. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I cut in, my voice rising. You've been enabling him for years. You let him drain your retirement and you still think he'll take care of you someday. He won't. You know it deep down. Mom flinched as though I'd struck her. Don't talk about your brother that way. He's been trying. Trying what? I shot back. Trying to find himself again at 36? Trying to figure out which career to quit next? Meanwhile, I'm the one holding this family together, and all I get is a pat on the head and a dusty set of china. Dad's voice hardened. Watch your tone, Clara. You're talking to your parents. I stood, the frustration boiling inside me. Then start acting like them. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom began to cry softly, and for a fleeting moment, guilt tried to creep in, but I pushed it down. I'd cried for years in silence. Now it was their turn to feel uncomfortable. After nearly 2 hours of circular arguing, they shifted tactics. Mom sniffled. If this is about the will, we can reconsider it. But please don't cut us off like this. You know how hard it's been. And there it was. The one word that always came up when they wanted to manipulate me. Hard. It's always been hard for you, I said quietly. But have you ever thought about how hard it's been for me? I've been living paycheck to paycheck so you could keep your house. 6 months later, I used the profits from selling their old house to buy my own home, a small, modern townhouse with white walls, big windows, and a garden that bloomed in the spring. On the first night, I stood barefoot on the balcony, wine glass in hand, feeling the wind brush through my hair. Leah came over that weekend to see it. She took one look around and grinned. So, this is what revenge looks like? I laughed softly. No, this is what peace looks like. Do they know you sold the house? I'm sure they do. Evan probably found out by now. Leah shook her head, smiling. I still can't believe you did it. You actually turned their betrayal into an investment. I shrugged. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting ahead. She raised her glass. To getting ahead. We clinked glasses, the sound light and satisfying. Weeks turned into months and life moved on. Evan stopped posting his self-righteous messages on social media. My parents stopped calling. And I stopped waiting for closure from people who were never capable of giving it. One evening, as I was leaving work, I got a message from an unknown number. I was wrong. About everything. Dad. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to reply, but then I didn't. Some things didn't need words. They needed time. I deleted the message and walked into the fading sunset, the city alive with sound and light. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally let go of the need to prove my worth to anyone. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming power, setting boundaries, and realizing that sometimes the sweetest victory is simply walking away stronger than you were before. It's strange how peace can feel so foreign when you've lived most of your life in turmoil. At first, I didn't know what to do with the quiet. I would come home after work, expecting a phone call from my mother, another request, another guilt trip. But the silence remained, and in that silence, I started to rebuild. I threw myself into projects I had postponed for years. I took weekend trips with Leah, started cooking again, and even adopted a golden retriever named Max, who greeted me every morning like I was the only person who had ever mattered. There was a freedom in simple things I never allowed myself to enjoy when I was constantly bracing for the next financial emergency. One morning, about 6 months after the final call with my mother, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a short note in my father's handwriting. Clara, we've been struggling since the move. Evan isn't who we thought he'd become. He's behind on rent and your mother's health isn't great. I'm not asking for money, I just wanted you to know we understand now. You were right, about everything. Love, Dad. I sat there, the note trembling slightly in my hand. The younger version of me would have cried, would have driven straight to their house ready to fix everything again, but not this time. Instead, I placed the letter gently in a drawer alongside the framed photo of me and my parents from years ago, before resentment had built the walls between us. I whispered a quiet prayer for them, for peace, for understanding. Then I closed the drawer. Some wounds don't need reopening. They just need time to scar. A few weeks later, I received another unexpected message, this time from my brother, Evan. I heard about the house. Didn't realize it was you. You made your point. But you didn't have to ruin Mom and Dad to prove it. I stared at his words for a long time before replying. I didn't ruin them, Evan. I just stopped saving them. There's a difference. He never replied. That night, I stepped out onto my balcony with a glass of wine. The city was calm, painted in shades of amber and gold by the fading sunset. Max curled at my feet, resting his head on my toes. I looked out at the skyline, thinking about how far I'd come. I used to believe that family loyalty meant sacrifice, that loving someone meant enduring whatever they did to you. But now I understood something deeper. Real love isn't about enabling. It's about boundaries, accountability, and mutual respect. And when those things vanish, love becomes debt. I had spent years paying emotional and financial interest on that debt, believing that someday I'd be repaid with appreciation. But I finally understood I wasn't meant to collect repayment from them. The real return came from investing in myself. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't require shouting or destruction. Sometimes revenge is simply creating a life so full and peaceful that the people who hurt you are forced to see what they lost. I've postponed my future for yours, and now that I've finally decided to take care of myself, suddenly I'm the villain. Dad's eyes flashed. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. That's funny, because I finally realized being selfless was the reason I've been miserable. They left soon after, their faces tight with anger and hurt. As the door closed behind them, I leaned against it, exhaling for what felt like the first time in years. The quiet was heavy but freeing. Over the next few weeks, the calls came daily, sometimes pleading, sometimes angry, sometimes cold and guilt-ridden. I answered none of them. Eventually, they stopped. The silence was blissful. Then one afternoon, I received a text from Leah. You might want to check Facebook. Your brother's been busy. My stomach twisted. I opened the app. Sure enough, there it was. A long post from Evan, written in that performative, self-righteous tone he used when fishing for sympathy. It's sad when family turns their back on you. I've always believed love means helping each other, but not everyone sees it that way. Some people think money makes them better. But family isn't about money. It's about loyalty. The comments were full of supportive replies. You're such a good son. Your parents are lucky to have you. Ignore the drama. Karma will sort it out. I nearly threw my phone. He was twisting the story, painting himself as the devoted son and me as the heartless daughter who abandoned her parents. The worst part? Mom had commented a heart emoji beneath his post. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, staring at the screen until the words blurred. Then something inside me shifted, a calm, calculating kind of anger. If they wanted to see me as the villain, then fine. But villains don't cry, they plan. So, I did. I began by pulling together everything I'd learned from 6 years of bailing them out. Their mortgage details, overdue taxes, unpaid bills. Through my job in marketing, I'd built strong connections in finance and real estate, and I knew exactly what their house was worth. A few weeks later, opportunity arrived in the form of an email from my friend Ryan, a property investor. He was buying several homes in my parents' neighborhood and mentioned he was looking for a silent partner. I've got one more property I'm trying to secure, he told me over coffee. The owners are behind on payments, but the land is valuable. When he told me the address, my heart stopped. It was my parents' house. I took a long sip of coffee, pretending to process. Inside, my pulse was roaring in my ears. They're behind on payments? I asked calmly. Ryan nodded. Yeah, bank's about ready to foreclose if they don't catch up. Sad story, but it's business. I thought about the countless nights I'd wired money to keep that same roof over their heads, the one they were willing to leave to Evan. The irony was poetic. Count me in, I said finally. Over the next 2 months, I quietly invested through Ryan's company, letting him handle the legalities. When the sale went through, I signed the paperwork as a silent owner. My name never appeared in the public listing. A week later, I received an email confirmation. Property transferred, ownership, Henderson Investments, LLC. And just like that, I owned my parents' house. I didn't tell Leah, not even Daniel, not yet. I wanted to handle this on my terms. The bank notified my parents of the change shortly after. The new ownership meant their mortgage would now be paid directly to the LLC, mine. For the first 2 months, they paid on time, but by the third, the payment was late. Then it was missed entirely. A formal letter went out, courtesy of my lawyer. Due to non-payment, your monthly rent will increase per contract adjustment terms. Failure to comply may result in eviction proceedings. I expected an angry call, and got one within an hour. Can you believe this? Mom raged over the phone. The new owners raised our rent. It's tripled. We can't afford this. I had to bite my lip to stop myself from laughing. Oh, that's awful, I said, feigning concern. Maybe Evan can help this time. Her silence on the other end was deafening. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't in months. Peace. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. For once, the scales had finally tipped in my favor. But I wasn't done yet. The real test would come when they discovered the truth, that their capable daughter, the one they took for granted, was now the landlord holding the keys to their future, and that moment was coming sooner than they thought. 2 weeks later, I got a voicemail that started with my mother's sobs and ended with my father's fury. Clara, please call us back. We don't know what to do. They've given us 30 days to either pay the new rate or vacate the property. How can people be so cruel? People can be cruel, I thought. Especially when they're pushed to learn what cruelty feels like. I didn't call back. Instead, I listened to the message again. Once for the pain, once for the irony, and once for the calm satisfaction that came from realizing I no longer owed anyone anything. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I wasn't their doormat. 3 days later, I decided it was time. I drove to their house, the house I technically owned now, pulling into the familiar driveway I'd repaired so many times before. The windows looked the same, the porch creaked the same way it always had, but something about it felt different. It wasn't home anymore. It was business. Mom opened the door, her face pale and strained. She looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen her. Dad stood behind her, his arms folded, suspicion in his eyes. "Clara?" Mom's voice trembled. "What are you doing here?" I smiled faintly. "I came to talk about the house." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" I stepped past them into the living room. The same beige furniture, the same faded rug, the same smell of coffee and dust. I sat on the couch and set a folder on the coffee table. Dad's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" I flipped it open, revealing the contract, the deed transfer, the payment schedule, all bearing the logo of Henderson Investments, LLC. His voice cracked. "Wait, Henderson? That's you." I met his gaze calmly. "Yes. I bought your mortgage 3 months ago. You've been paying rent to me ever since." The room fell silent. The only sound was the faint ticking of the wall clock. Mom's eyes widened. You did this?" Her voice was almost a whisper. I nodded slowly. After everything, I realized I needed to start investing wisely, so I did. And when this property came up for sale, I saw an opportunity. Dad's face turned red. An opportunity? To humiliate us? "No," I said softly. "An opportunity to stop being your backup plan." He took a step forward, fists clenched. "This is revenge, isn't it? You're punishing us because we left the house to Evan." I let out a slow breath. "No, Dad. This is accountability. For years, I gave without question. You took without thanks. Now, for the first time, you're the ones who have to adjust." Mom sank onto the couch beside me, tears forming. "Clara, we don't have the money. We can barely manage the new payment. Please, can't you lower it? Just until we figure something out?" Her voice cracked, fragile and desperate. For a moment, the old me, the one who always caved, almost surfaced. But then I remembered the will, the years of excuses, the countless times I'd been told to understand. "I can't," I said quietly. "It's business now. You'll need to decide if you want to stay or move." Dad glared at me, his voice trembling with anger. "You're just like your brother said. Cold, heartless." I tilted my head. "Funny. He's the one who hasn't called you in months." The silence that followed was sharp. I stood, sliding the papers back into the folder. "You have 30 days to make a decision. If you want, I can recommend a realtor to help you downsize." Mom started to cry. "Clara, please, we're your parents." I hesitated at the door, hand resting on the frame. "And I loved you enough to prove it, for years. But love without respect isn't family, it's servitude. I'm done being your safety net." Then I walked out. Outside, the sun was bright, reflecting off the car windshield. I got in, closed the door, and just sat there. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just breathed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't angry anymore. A month later, I received an automated notice from my lawyer. Property vacated. Payment default unresolved. They had moved. I drove by one last time before listing it for sale. The house looked abandoned now. Curtains gone, mailbox overflowing, a for sale sign tilting slightly in the wind. I felt nothing. Not triumph, not guilt, just closure. A few months after the sale closed, I found out through mutual friends that my parents had moved in with Evan. He had promised to help them through the transition. The irony was almost poetic. Within 3 months, Mom called me, not to apologize, but to complain. "Evan can't handle it," she said. "He's struggling. He doesn't have a steady job and the bills are piling up." I listened quietly. Then, as kindly as I could, I said, "I'm sure he'll figure it out. You always said he sees the bigger picture." She went silent. Then softly, "You really won't help, will you?" I smiled, though she couldn't see it. No, Mom, not this time. When the call ended, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker like stars. I wasn't celebrating their downfall. I was celebrating my freedom. Months passed, then a year. I sold another property with Ryan's help and bought a second townhouse as an investment. My finances flourished. My peace deepened. And one spring afternoon, as I tended to the small garden behind my new home, I heard laughter from the next yard over. A family, young parents, 2 little girls, their dog chasing a red ball across the grass. The mother caught my eye and waved. For a brief moment, I thought about my parents, how they had once been that family, how life had slowly eroded the kindness that once lived between us. But then I realized something important. I didn't need their validation anymore. The little girl's laughter, the scent of blooming jasmine, the gentle wag of Max's tail, all of it was proof that peace wasn't something I needed from anyone else. I had built it myself. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with streaks of pink and gold, I whispered softly to the wind. Half a farewell, half a promise. I forgive you, not for you, but for me.